Let's talk about the cash economy, because this is a bit of an election issue, particularly for the Nationals. I'll be speaking to David Littleproud very shortly. The government is moving to keep cash in the mix for a bit longer, but what are they doing exactly? Moving laws to make sure businesses that provide essential services will still accept cash? Well, mostly they already do, don't they?
94%, Laura, still accept cash. So the government is the first to say this is not a flood or a tidal wave of businesses refusing to take cash, but it's a sense of future-proofing, if you like. That's the argument from the Treasurer, that particularly in rural and regional areas, there are 1.5 million Australians that still rely on cash for up to 80% of their daily transactions. So the government is looking to move a mandate on essential items, businesses that sell groceries, for example, petrol, pharmaceutical products, to ensure that they all have to accept and trade in cash for the decades ahead, regardless of however many people use it or the transition towards a general cashless society. The government's going to now embark on a consultation process. That will take more than a year for a mandate to kick in on January 1 of 2026. The government argues that this is simply following the moves of other countries to future-proof the economy and to make sure that consumers have choice, and those who have no other way but to pay for their goods and services with cash are protected and can continue to access those services.
So we're making sure that people can continue to pay cash for essential items if they want to and if they need to.
It's a government that's scratching around for an economic agenda because it knows it's losing the war against the big issue, which is the cost of living.
So cash sticking around, Laura. Cheques, though, will be gone. The government also announcing the final cheques will be taken out of service from September 2029. So you can keep the notes in your wallet, but you can probably start to put the chequebooks away.
Okay, Cam, thank you. Let's go to our next guest now, who will be happy to talk about cash, as he always is, the Nationals leader, David Littleproud. David, great to see you. The government moving on this. Is this something that you support?
Oh yeah, we'll look at the detail, and obviously we want to make sure that cash remains legal currency and tender in this country. What we also need to look at is the banks and the role that they play, and the fact that they've shut down many branches across regional and rural Australia, and the source of cash becomes more complex when that happens. Now, we've said to the government through inquiries, but also to the Australian Bankers Association, I've got to say Anna Bly's done an appalling job. She's been warned so many times about this, that they should have a proactive approach around how do we fill that void when branches start to close. There's licensed post offices that are small businesses where banks could partner with in a better way than what they are at the moment. They've arrogantly ignored our calls for that. And so I see that the government's also talking about a levy. I'm very cautious about a levy because that means it gets passed on when there are better ways in which to attack this problem in regional and rural Australia.
Okay, so we've talked about this a lot. You have been engaging in a bit of friendly fire with the banks, I might say, about closing some of these branches, cash not being available to rural and regional constituents. This is absolutely your wheelhouse, being the Nationals leader. But the government has proposed now a levy on banks to pay for that, to make sure that, this is viable into the future. But you don't like that.
Well, I don't know. They haven't detailed what they're going to do with that levy. It just looks as though it's a tax.
What detail do you need? If it's a levy on banks, I mean, you've always said that banks can afford it.
Yeah, but where does that money go, Laura? How does that solve the problem? So I'll articulate, this is the challenge, is you can whack a levy and then it goes back into consolidated revenues and does nothing for regional Australia. That's the business model regional Australia's copped all the time. So what we're saying is, and I've said to the banks and to the ABA for a number of years now in frustration, is saying, let's sit down and work out a practical solution that is around a user pay that supports licensed post offices. See, in those regional and rural communities, they're mum and dad family businesses. And if the banks were all forced to sign up to having a service provided in there, they paid an appropriate amount for the transaction that took place and made a capital investment in the infrastructure in some of those post offices, then you would see those services preserved. Because you can see in some towns, They just can't jump on a bus and go to the next suburb. You're talking a couple of 100 kilometres difference from one town to the next to find a branch. So what I'm saying is that the ABA has arrogantly snubbed their nose. So too as some of the major banks like ANZ who won't even sign up to that.
Okay,
and
so
at that juncture, we need to sit down and work through this, but it's more complex than just saying let's put a levy. That's a lazy solution. What we need to understand is the complexity of banking in regional rural Australia. And as someone that used to work for one out in the sticks, I can tell you it is a lot more complex than just whacking a levy on it.
So you're saying that all banks should be contributing to keeping regional services open and available. Who isn't contributing?
Well, at the moment, there's only the big four. Three of them, Westpac, Commonwealth, and NAB, are part of that regional banking. ANZ refuses to. I mean,
why?
They've arrogant. Well, you'd have to ask ANZ. They can't tell you. They'd actually close everything if they could. And effectively, they probably have already anyway. They're no friend of regional Australia, ANZ. They're a joke of an organisation, also morally, in trying to stop lending money to industries in regional Australia because they've taken some moralistic view. So I have no time for ANZ whatsoever. But what we can do is work through this, because what we've got to understand, where branches have closed and may be closing, there's an opportunity to have a service that looks at what that delivery model may be. And that delivery model could be through licensed post offices. And we've made that clear that we want to work constructively with the Banking Association about getting to that, but they've arrogantly snubbed their nose to it. But if you're going to not just provide the big four, there's competition, and I think regional banks have done much of the lifting in regional Australia, and they shouldn't bear the burden.
Regional banks to be doing the regional lifting?
Oh, no, with respect, when you talk about regional banks, they're not necessarily running in every market. Suncorp basically runs in Queensland, and BOQ in Queensland, so Bendigo is obviously more a southern bank. So regional, just understand the terminology is a little bit different. But
fair enough.
There is an opportunity for us to do it. But there is frustration with the ABA.
As long as we've been talking on this program, you have been talking about this very issue. You wanted change here. The government has responded. This is essentially your idea, is it not?
No, it's not. I'm sorry.
What's the solution?
What we've said is that, well, this is where we need to work with the Australian Bankers Association. If they can't do it in a constructive way, then the way is for reopening up banking licences and putting conditions on it. That's where government should interject so that the service is provided. But we could have done it in a constructive way if it wasn't for Anna Bligh and the Australian Bankers Association, who have roadblocked us at every time we've said this is an issue, and at some point we're going to have to face up to it. We're going to have to work through a solution. We stand ready to be constructive. We prefer to make sure that it's a solution that doesn't ultimately cost everyone more, but it's a way that provides that service in a reasonable way where everybody can have their product out in front of regional Australia, and it's one that continues to protect jobs in regional Australia.
Okay, let me ask you about bullying now, because Peter Dutton has got out on the front foot. It was remiss of me, but I forgot to ask him about it when I had him on last hour. So I'm going to ask you about it, because I think you're pretty much on the same page here, getting out in front of this and wanting to support a national framework. Have the government been dragging their feet on this? What do you think needs to be done in the area of bullying? Because it can be really difficult to tackle.
Yeah, well, I think we've been proactive, and we've said over 12 months ago that age verification is important to make sure that those under 16 only have access to social media where there's parental consent. Now, obviously, the government's working towards that, but they took it so slowly that they said they were going to start a project model to start off, a program to see if it worked, and now started in June, still hasn't started it, and now said, yes, well, let's do it. And I think we do need a national approach, but we need to also capture those platforms like Snapchat that are used. And this isn't a silver bullet. We've never said it's a silver bullet, but it's a tool that we can give parents that helps them to make sure they keep their kids safe. And that's a decision that is still made by parents, not by government, but by giving them the tools, and parents make that determination after it. So we've been proactive, and while the government's announced pilots, never started them, then saw the issues that continue to permeate, have come up with policy. We're the first to support it, but where there's deficiencies, we'll ask them to amend it and to strengthen it where we can.
Yeah, big tech is still seemingly acting with impunity, not only when it comes to regulation, like we've just discussed, but also when it comes to tax as well. We see the proliferation of scams. The government has some pretty good legislation before the Parliament to tackle this. What's a hold-up?
Well, that's legislation's coming in this week, as I appreciate, and I think we'll be making our position clear on that. Where we can strengthen it and making it better, then we will. I mean, I think we've got a very strong record, no matter the issue, that we've always put forward amendments to strengthen it, whether it be on immigration or detainees. We've actually been constructive in adding and strengthening legislation that will protect Australians. So, as I understand, that legislation will be introduced this week, and we'll look at it through the lens of what it'll be able to provide, and whether it can be strengthened. Then we will bring forward amendments in a constructive way.